Good morning. Bright and early here at Crocodile Bridge in the Kruger National Park. Today we've got a trip of about 140 kilometers up to Malelane, which is the last leg of our week-long trek through the Kruger National Park from north to south. Let's see what opportunities we get today. In today's video, I'm going to take you on that journey across from Crocodile Bridge to the final destination before we head back to Johannesburg, that being Malelane. Similar to the other videos in the series, I hope you've been watching those, I'll share my sightings and some of the images I captured. But in addition to that, in today's video, I'm also going to take you through the total cost of the trip. For a wildlife photographer, the Kruger National Park just has to be a bucket list destination. But a quick Google search can quickly dispel any dreams of actually making it happen, with organised trips costing $800, $1,000, even $1,500 per night, per person. Well, in that scenario, a worthwhile trip of a week or so is very often out of reach, especially if you're travelling from Europe or the US, and even more so if you're travelling as a couple or as a family. But as I have shown in this series, there is a different way. It has its pros, of course, and it has its cons, but a self-drive photography tour is absolutely doable. It is safe, and it is significantly lower cost. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what I spent on this 7-day, 6-night tour of the entirety of the Kruger National Park. Before we do that, let's jump back to day 5 of the trip. There's not much happening up the front, but it's always worth keeping an eye on your rear view mirror as the sun rises behind us.
This is as good a day as any to start the rebuilding of life.
I was frantically looking for a composition, for a subject to capture in that beautiful morning light. Nothing iconic was screaming at me, so I made the most of what I had at hand before the sun got too high.
On my skin, beginning to thaw from within. Today and not tomorrow.
And here you can see in the background the green fields of agriculture. That's clearly the boundary of Kruger National Park to the south, as man has encroached on nature.
To see the horizon and the far. Excuses were too
Just the other side of the Crocodile River.
but they've all gone out the window of this car. And when I
The Kruger Park has
feel on my
expanded many times over its history. Not so much recently, but we can live in hope. One of the most fascinating things about the Kruger National Park is just how dramatically the landscape shifts as you travel from the far north to the far south. I entered the park at the Punda Maria Gate in the north, and there the park feels vast and remote. It's dominated by Mapani woodlands. The horizon seems endless, with scattered baobabs breaking the skyline, giving it that ancient, almost primeval feel. It's rugged country, and wildlife can sometimes be harder to spot. But that sense of isolation, to me, makes it feel special. As you head further south, the character of the park slowly changes. Mopani gives way to broader woodlands and mixed bushveld. With wider river systems, the vegetation gets greener and the animal densities a little higher. The terrain begins to roll into gentle hills. By the time you reach the south, the landscape feels more varied and alive. Tall riverine forests hug the watercourses. Open grasslands stretch out between patches of bush, and rocky outcrops rise from the plains. It's this diversity that makes the southern part of Kruger so productive for wildlife viewing. And this propensity of wildlife and the proximity to Johannesburg and Pretoria make it a real favourite for visitors, so it does get busier. Whilst there is no doubt that you have more opportunity to spot wildlife in the south, it's still wildlife, and there are no guarantees. So I've seen a bird of prey off in the distance. It looks like a vulture, but I've seen nothing this morning. It's a long way away, so I'm not sure it's going to work, but I'm going to put the 600 prime back on, which I'd replace with my 7200. And I'm going to put my 1.4 teleconverter on and see.
Clouds go by and the sun is set high.
A lot of photographers skip right past the impala because they're so common, but honestly, that's a mistake. They're beautiful animals, sleek, expressive, and always in motion. If you catch them in a good light or framed against the bush, they can make some great photos.
Your day with me always. Be brave. We don't need far too much. Just stay brave.
Before we continue with the journey across to Malelane, let's look at what the total spend was for my 7-day, 6-night tour of the Kruger Park from north to south. The first cost, of course, for a self-drive is a car. If you're travelling into South Africa from Europe or from the US, then you'll need to hire a car. I live in Johannesburg and hired a car from the nearby airport, Lanseria, but the cost would be much the same if you were to hire from the main international airport, OR Tambo. Quick misconception to put a pin in, and that is that you need a 4x4 to go to the Kruger. You absolutely do not. A 2-wheel drive vehicle is absolutely fine. Even a standard sedan is fine for the majority of the roads. The roads are split into two, the H roads, which are tar roads and are perfect. There's fewer potholes in the tar roads of the Kruger Park than there are in the main roads of Johannesburg. The S roads are generally fine, but in the dry season they can become corrugated and pretty bumpy and gnarly. In the wet season they can become muddy and occasionally too wet to drive. But generally speaking, the S roads are also pretty good. I hired a Toyota Fortuner, which is a fairly large vehicle, only the 2-wheel drive version, but I wanted that height, the ability to be able to see over the grasses, over the edge of the bush by the side of the road. So that extra height that you get from the Toyota Fortuner or other SUVs can be really useful. The total cost for the entire 7 days was 13,123 Rand. That included my excess waiver, so that if there was an incident, my excess wouldn't be too high, and also includes an additional charge because I exceeded the 200 kilometers a day that was included in the fee. So 13,000 Rand, approximately $730 or £540. The next cost to consider is the conservation fees, which is a daily fee, effectively an entrance fee to the Kruger Park. For me, as a South African ID holder, a South African resident, the costs were only 768 Rands For an international traveler, it's a little more expensive. It's about 3 times that amount. So in US dollars, about $135. But when you visit the Kruger, that conservation fee, it's not just a ticket, it's what helps keeps the park alive. The money goes directly into protecting wildlife, funding anti-poaching units, maintaining roads and waterholes, and supporting research. Without it, the park simply couldn't sustain this incredible ecosystem for future generations. And then, of course, you're going to need accommodation, and there's lots of options here. Very, very high-end lodges, all the way down to tented accommodation in the rest camps. I took a middle ground, perhaps slightly lower than middle ground, and took small rooms and tented accommodation, but safari tented accommodation. I didn't have to carry my own camping gear. So 2 nights I was in safari tents. One of those was classified as a luxury tent, had fridge and freezer and shower and all of those good things. The other was just a standard safari tent with a bed. It did have a fridge outside on the patio, so it was fine. The other accommodation were pretty small residential units, normally just one room for the bed and for the kitchen area, with a small separate shower room and toilet facilities. Fairly basic, certainly not high-end, certainly not luxury. There's nobody coming in to leave chocolates on your pillow, but they're clean, they have what you need, and they're easy. And the reality is, I spend as little time in the room as possible. I'm on the road as soon as the gate opens, which is 5:30, 6, depending on the time of the year you travel. And then I'm on the road until dark. By the time I've eaten, done all of my routines with cameras, memory cards, charging, batteries, all of those things, then I'm in bed by 9 o'clock and out by 5 o'clock. So I spend as little time as possible in the accommodation, so I don't see the need to spend significant sums of money on it. The total cost for the 6 nights was 8,900 Rand, or as near as damn it, $500, 370 pounds. And that cost would be the same whether you're a South African resident or an international visitor. I booked fairly late, so I don't know if that price is inflated versus a well-planned in advance booking, but those were the costs: 8,900 Rand, $500, 370 pounds. Other costs, of course, are fuel. I went over the 200 kilometers a day limit, so the total fuel cost me 2,750 Rand, $150. 115 pounds. That was from the moment I picked the car up to the moment I dropped the car back in Johannesburg with a full tank. Outside of that, food and drink and nibbles and just general day-to-day was 2,000 Rand, $110 or 80 pounds. I don't have expensive taste, but this was more than enough for 3 meals a day and snacks during the day and drinks. I'm a non-drinker from an alcohol perspective, but I drink alcohol-free beer, and I had alcohol-free beer every evening within that 2,000 Rand. And that's the total cost for the entire trip. So for everything, all inclusive, I spent 27,500 Rand, 1,500 US dollars, 1,150 Great British pounds. Bear in mind that was for one traveller. The car hire, the accommodation, the fuel costs could all have been divided by 2 or 3 or even 4 total travellers. There would have been no increase in cost, definitely no increase in cost if I'd taken one extra person to me, other than some additional food and additional entrance fees. But car hire, easy, accommodation, all of my accommodation was for at least 2 people, some for up to 4, and my fuel costs wouldn't have been different. So those total costs were for one person without any of the costs being shared. I hope that gives you a really good idea of the kind of budget you need to be considering if you're looking to do a self-drive. Compare that to an organised trip, and of course you'll see that's significantly lower. than an organised trip, especially if you're sharing some of these costs amongst multiple travellers. There are, of course, pros to taking an organised trip. I cover the main differences between a self-drive and one of those organised photo safaris in a separate video, and I'll put a link in the description below and on the screen above. Ultimately, with everything in life, there are pros and cons and trade-offs, and you have to make your decision. But I'm hoping that that cost breakdown at least gives you some information to help you make that decision for yourselves. Let's get back to day 5 of the tour. Whilst I haven't seen anything for the entire morning and it's now 5 to midday, it's been a beautiful drive. Scenery is just stunning. And that's the thing with the Kruger National Park. There are so many different environments, different geologies, different landscapes. But it's invariably beautiful. So I'm at a watering hole and there's some impala. They're really scouting the area before they decide to drink. Impalas are always on the lookout for predators, but these seem particularly nervous. However, the only other animals with them was a herd of buffalo. But it wasn't long until they were joined by elephant, and there were also a number of warthogs with their good friends, the oxpeckers.
Heavy branches crack and split. If we holler, will you hurry? Can you hear us through the wind? Blue sky calm, dancing in between us. Take us up, lay us down. Blue sky calm, promise not to leave us. Tarry not to our town. There's a violence under our feet, running stitches through our homes. Bring a lantern, bring it quickly. With the exception of a couple of more elephant, that was my last sighting of the day. And so I headed to the rest camp. The scenery was just magnificent, with the kopjes rising magnificently from the landscape. I wish I could have taken a few landscape images, but handheld from the car, not the ideal. So I'm at the rest camp for the evening, a place called Malelane, which is right down in the south of the park. My last night here. It's a beautiful, peaceful setting. It's right by the river. I'll show you the view in just a second.
And we're coming up to about 3:15, so the sun's starting to dip, and now's the time that every other night I've gone out for the evening drive. But tonight I don't think I'm going to do that. I've got a lot of stuff to organise from a week away. I'm going to get all of my files downloaded, the memory cards cleared, make sure everything's backed up properly. And then I think I'm going to sit here. I saw a tree squirrel as I pulled in, so hopefully I might catch a shot of a tree squirrel or two. If I did, then I'll show them to you now. If you don't see any, then you know I didn't get any. Anyway, so that's the end of the trip from Crocodile Bridge to Malelane. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you enjoyed the images. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop me a note in the comments below. I read every single one of them. I do my very best to respond to as many as I possibly can. Click subscribe, click like, all of that stuff. And check out the other videos from this Kruger trip. I look forward to seeing you soon. In the meantime, please take care. Bye bye.